She flew silent. So why did the sky feel like it was watching her back? Lexa rode the upper edge of the stratosphere, 50,000 feet above the Pacific, where breath became data and silence hummed through the wires of her F-22. No chatter in the headset, no voice from command. Just her, the wind whisper of systems cooling below the skin of the jet, and the blinking language of radar pulses scanning a mostly empty sky. She liked it that way. High cover. That was the job. Keep the path clean for a slow drone relay and a Black Hawk detachment running ghost lines below the clouds. She wasn't supposed to fire. Just observe. Just make sure the storm didn't come early. But 23 minutes into the mission, the first flicker blinked onto her scope. A pixel out of place. Just a dip in the signal curve. Barely enough to flag. Not even a contact. Not yet. She tapped a marker, stayed quiet, waited. Another sweep. Nothing. Lexa didn't relax. Her fingers hovered near the ECM switch. Calm. Steady. Always ready. Something didn't feel right. The ocean below had become geometry. Smooth lines. Low haze. The kind of quiet that felt too intentional. She adjusted pitch slightly. The motion fluid. Recalibrated her overlay. There. Again. A sharper blink this time. Not noise. A coded targeting pulse. Then gone. Her threat receiver didn't scream. Not yet, but her instincts did. She rolled left. Dropped 200 feet. Low enough to throw her profile. Not enough to rattle the net. The convoy below, still unaware, floated forward under pale cloud curtains. Then the third ping hit. Nada. Glitch this time. A lock. Red blared across her HUD. Lexa didn't hesitate. No call to command. No waiting for approval. She dumped countermeasures, cut throttle, and dove. The sky collapsed around her. Mist and static ripped across her canopy. Rain smeared the HUD into lightless blur. The missile was close. Too close. She had no idea where it was coming from. Only that it would be fast. Her jet screamed downward through steel cloud. Then, the impact, a flash, not lightning. Not thunder, impact. The cockpit jerked sideways, ribs against harness. Power eroded, flickered, died. Systems blinked out one by one, like a heart failing in slow motion. No time to eject, no altitude for it. She triggered the emergency reboot by hand. Glove half off, eyes on the altimeter. Still descending. Fast. She pulled the stick. Sluggish. The jet bucked, rolled. She held it anyway. Through a tear in the clouds. The island, ragged shorelines. Dense green. One strip of open beach hammered by the storm. No flat land, no real chance. She didn't need chance. She needed survivable. A ridge loomed to her left, half stone, half jungle. It would have to do. She banked toward it, engine fire trailing smoke. Behind her like a warning. Then came the fall, not an explosion. A grinding, trees cracked, stone tore, metal screamed across the jungle floor. Then, stillness. Lexa lay in a broken cockpit, tilted hard against a rain-slick ridge, her jet's nose buried in roots and earth. She breathed 3 times, then moved. Her fingers found the harness, released it. She kicked the bent canopy and crawled into the storm, wind clawing her helmet. Ash and ozone thick in the air. She turned back once. The Raptor was done. One wing gone, tail twisted, frame cracked in 3 directions. She didn't linger. The sky above her grayed. Rain thickened. No voices on the net. No alarm, no rescue. Just silence and the hiss of her backup radio. The kind of silence that felt deliberate. Lexa crouched by the fuselage. Found her survival. Pack, check the beacon, primary down. Backup uplink blinking red every 10 seconds. Steady as a pulse, still no reply. She moved anyway. The slope above her promised line of sight. That was the first goal. The ground sucked at her boots. Vines dragging at her legs. Her thigh screamed, bruised, maybe cracked. But it held. At The crest. She paused, looked back. The wreck burned without flame, smoke rising slow into the gray. From above, the heat would light up, a perfect target. She couldn't stay near it. The jungle was thick, alive, but too quiet. That's when she saw a thread. Thin, artificial, tripwire. Lexa dropped low, scanned with calm precision. Another line higher, barely visible, masked with an optical scatter lens. Not a trap, an ambush. This crash wasn't random. Someone had expected it. Her heart didn't race. She just breathed slower, tightened her movement. This was mercenary work. She could tell. She'd seen them before. Quiet operators, high-tech, low morals. The kind who watched instead of chased. She climbed higher. Eyes always moving. Not just forward, above, behind. Pilot thinking. The map in her head floated in 3D angles. Vectors, cover lines, elevation. She reached the ridge and took cover. Pulled her cracked optics from the pouch. Infrared. Semi-functional. One flicker below. Maybe heat from the wreck, or maybe something else. She powered them down. Too unstable. Then she waited. The wind changed. A sound came through the trees. Rotor blades. Not close, not fast. Just steady low. Lexa froze. Listened. No visual. Just a question she couldn't yet answer. Whose bird was that? And what the hell were they waiting for? The smoke cleared just enough to reveal a bird. But it wasn't the one she was hoping for. Lexa spotted it through the gaps in the trees. Rotor wash cut smoke into ribbons. A black hawk came in low, slicing between canopy breaks. Too fast. Too hard. Not recon. Not medevac. Quick reaction force. The kind you send when something's already gone wrong. She didn't move. Just crouched low behind a tangled root system. Cloak blending into the wet green of the ridge. One hand steady on the wrist beacon. A single blink. Infrared laser triggered. Sharp and rhythmic, piercing upward through the rising heat. The bird adjusted pitch. Someone saw her. They pivoted. Turned toward the slope. Not ideal ground. Too steep. Too tight. But that didn't stop them. Landing gear flared out. Then came the sound, sharp and clean. A suppressed rifle cracked once from the tree line above. The pilot flinched. One crewman jumped out. Firing back, two more peeled left. Clearing foliage with short, clipped bursts. Lexa didn't hesitate. She moved straight toward the fire line. Her gait was tight, calculated. No rifle, just a sidearm recovered from her kit and a cracked optic slung low on her belt. She didn't look like rescue. She moved like a ghost, through shadows, between the trees. The enemy wasn't loud. That was the worst part. No shouting, no scrambling. Just the hiss of comes and tactical movement. Precise, clinical. She caught the glint first. Shoulder plate moving between ferns. Gear laced with infrared masking. Plates designed to scatter drone sweeps. Mercs, not locals, not random. She flanked wide around the crew's push, sliding in beside one of the Black Hawk operators. He turned, half raising his rifle, then stopped. He saw the Raptor flight harness. Her helmet still clipped to her side. His eyes narrowed, confused. Lexa didn't explain, just pointed, two fingers, low and sharp, toward the bluff. He nodded, shifted, trusted her instinct. It wasn't a full ambush, just a test, a push, a delay. She knew the tactic: box them in, hold them just long enough for something bigger to arrive. That meant they had minutes, maybe less. Lexa moved up the slope with another operator, a weapons sergeant, dust still fresh on his jaw. He asked casually, "Call sign?" She didn't answer, just scanned the ridge, reading it like a flight path. Not where the fire came from, but what lanes they left open. Containment, not assault. She tapped the side of her cracked optic, adjusted the angle. That's when she saw it. A flare of soft red, faint, triangulated. Not from the mercs. From above, satellite sync. Which meant she cursed under her breath. Surface-to-air systems, Col Blanche, still offline, but close. She turned back fast, ducked behind the tree line, and found the sergeant again. They regrouped at the edge of the clearing. One of the crew had taken a hit. Bicep, clean pass through, still walking. The pilot paced tight circles near the bird, rifle in one hand, jaw locked. Lexa stepped into the open, her voice low, steady. "They're not trying to kill us. They're fixing us in place." The others paused. The medic froze mid-rap. The pilot looked over, eyes narrow. Lexa laid it out fast. The movement pattern, the jammer signs, the partial contact net, a delay wedge. That meant a second force was coming. And it was bigger. They couldn't stay. Not even 30 more seconds. The pilot asked where to go. No air support. No cover. Lexa answered without hesitation. Not. Air. Not yet. We need elevation. Dense canopy. 2-degree radar drop behind the spine. The pilot stared, then looked at her own wrist display. The map blinked once. Lexa didn't wait. She moved southeast, toward the interior. Someone behind her muttered. She crashed. Why is she leading? No one argued. Not the one with the rifle. He followed, then another, then all of them. They moved like a team, quiet, coordinated, because she made sense, because they needed her to, at the edge of the clearing. Lexa paused by a flat rock, held. A small hand mirror low to check the shaded path. No movement. Rotors above spun slower now. Idle. They weren't taking off until the next zone cleared. The pilot jogged up behind her, boots soft on moss. "Where exactly are you taking us?" Lexa didn't answer. She just raised her hand and pointed forward. Into the brush, the canopy closed in tighter with each step inland. Vines hung like veins. Roots coiled through black volcanic soil. The slope narrowed into a runoff trail, soft. Earth-pocked with algae and stone, Lexa moved at the front, one hand brushing ridges and roots, reading them like braille. Behind her, the crew fell into interval spacing. No orders, just instinct. The wounded man limped near the center, arm over his teammate's shoulder. The others rotated point and rear. No voices, no wasted breath. Lexa had mapped their path 3 ways. Physical cover, radar shadow, thermal drift. It wasn't perfect, but it would do. In her pouch, she carried scorched chaff strips pulled from the rack. She dropped them every 20 meters. Enough to confuse drone pings. Enough to buy time. At a fork in the slope, she placed a shard of her canopy glass, angled up. The next burst of sunlight from orbit would bounce it, like movement. False trail, false heat, false hope, everything had to mislead. They reached a bend where the earth dipped sharply into heavy undergrowth. Lexa held up a hand. Everyone stopped. Then, a sound, subtle, mechanical, not natural. A high-pitched electronic chirp echoed once. Drone altitude correction. Lexa ducked beside a split tree trunk. Signal blow. The operator who'd hesitated earlier slid next to her. Eyes sharp now, breathing. Tight but steady. The drone passed above, matte black. Fast, sensors mounted like eyes. It hovered, adjusted pitch, optics scanned in slow arcs. Lexa didn't blink, didn't move. Even her breath waited. It hovered once more, then vanished, northward. Only when the sound faded did they move again. The silence afterward was thicker, more deliberate. The jungle should have been alive. Birds, insects, wind instead. Nothing. Just footsteps, just breath. Lexa didn't need a radar to read this. Something was ahead. Something wrong. They reached the next ridge break and went to ground. Lexa pulled the optics, scanned the valley. This was the fallback zone. The place command had marked for evac. But nothing was ever clean. Third pass, she found it. Half buried in clay, between the roots of a low tree. Not a mine, not a trap, a dish, angular, silent, rotating. Wires like roots digging into soil, and every few seconds, a pulse, static, invisible. but unmistakable. Jamming, her stomach tightened. Not civilian, not salvaged. Military grade. The kind that didn't belong here, and yet. Already online, Lexa didn't call it out. She didn't have to. She pointed. They all saw it. And something shifted. Not panic, recognition. This wasn't theory anymore. This was here. This was real. They fanned out, took cover, prepped quietly. No one waited for orders, but they still looked to her. She cracked an infrared flare in her fist. Set it low, barely visible. Fallback marker or bait. Either way, it mattered. The sergeant dropped beside her. That's not contractor kid. Lexa didn't reply. He was right. The shape, the wiring, too clean, too dangerous. The team began laying out movement lines. No attack yet, but readiness. Lexa watched the dish. Watched it pulse every 5 seconds. Steady, like a heart out of sync, like a warning. The jammer didn't need to shoot. It just needed to keep them blind. And right now, it was doing that perfectly. Why didn't the sensor fire? Why was it letting her walk so close? Lexa studied the jammer like she used to study radar trails. Not with fear, with angles, timing, intent. The dish pulsed every 5 seconds. She could feel it through her ribs. Like a pressure wave under the skin. Not just noise, force. Each rotation a quiet act of denial. You don't get comes. You don't get rescue. You don't get seen. The slope below was volcanic clay. Exposed. Wet. Treacherous, no cover. Wires snaked from the dish into trees, like veins in an open wound. It was surgical, precise. Too perfect to be freelance. This wasn't terrain to fight on, it was terrain to bend. Lexa scanned the path between them and the dish. She could see it now. The arc of its sensor net. Not random, a sweep. 5 seconds on, 2 seconds drift. Just enough to move if you were insane. Or exact. She pulled her gloves off, clipped them to her belt. The sergeant crouched beside her again, watching the gesture. You're not going in there alone. Lexa didn't answer yet. She was still doing the math in her head. Signal wave. Drift pulse, blind spot, all calculated like wind drag over a broken fuselage. We have one window, she said quietly. The sensor net's dual-keyed. Heat in motion, I can thread the pulse. The pilot shook her head from behind cover. You're not built for that. Lexa didn't raise her voice. Didn't flinch. No one else knows the timing. You'll be watching from 70 meters up. I'll give you the marker. Someone muttered something sharp. Disbelief, maybe protest. She didn't hear the words. Just the tone. Lexa ignored it. She picked up the spent flare casing from earlier. Slid it into her side pouch. Light end forward. The pilot moved closer. Voice low, almost angry now. You're not expendable. Lexa looked her dead in the eyes. I'm not being expendable. I'm being useful. No one argued after that. She moved before they could stop her. Down the slope, silent, the pulse rhythm. Counted in her chest. 1, 2, 3. Step. Hold. 1, 2, 3. Slide. Her boots pressed gently into the soil. Her harness creaked once, softly. Her beacon ticked at her hip. Active now, short range only. Couldn't break the jamming net. But maybe, just maybe, enough for the Black Hawk sensors to pick up a ghost. She was that ghost now, moving dot, timed precision. She reached the tripwire. Not a wire at all, just a shape, infrared burst trap. Thin, meant to catch warmth, not mass. Lexa shifted her step. Slid through the arc, 1 inch too far, and it would trigger a silent chain of death. But it didn't. She passed clean. The jammer rotated again. 3/4 of a sweep. Static rolled out. Lexa felt it hit her like a current, pricking the hairs on her neck. She reached the marker zone, stopped, raised both hands. Beacon flared once, up above. The crew saw it. Overwatch had the angle now. This was the window. Lexa moved 1 foot forward, enough to break concealment. And then it happened. A ripple. Not from her. From the ridgeline, two shapes snapped forward, suppressed rifles shouldered, heads tilted like wolves, scenting blood. Lexa froze. The jammer flared again, hard. It sensed the breach. A coded broadcast rolled across the field. This was it. From behind the ridge, the second Black Hawk came in low, blades nearly silent until the final dive. No flare, no warning. Just movement. A door gunner leaned out. Surgical fire. 2 bursts. Controlled. Each enemy dropped clean. No scream. No chaos. Just bone-splitting precision. The jammer sparked on the third volley. Something inside it caught. Maybe a capacitor. Maybe a fuse. But it flared and spat flame. Lexa dove. Arms tucked under a root flare. Heat rushing past her. Dirt kicked into her mouth. Her body tight as steel. Then, stillness. No more pulses, no more sweep. The air went clean. She stood up slowly. Her knees shook. The dish smoked behind her, wires writhing like dead snakes. The crew was moving now. Weapons low, no longer firing. The pilot dropped beside the ruined jammer and scanned it with a wrist HUD. Her headset blinked green. Then, finally, a voice cut through Lex's earpiece. Not static, not garble, just words. Bird inbound. You lit the sky, Raptor. We see you. Lexa closed her eyes once. Just once. Then she turned and walked back toward the team. The second Black Hawk banked hard, lining up for a clearing Lexa had marked. With her eyes hours earlier, the kind of gap no satellite could see, but she had. The rotors chewed the jungle into storm. Leaves scattered, stones jumped. The LZ wasn't perfect. Steep slope, tight arc, but it would hold. Lexa moved toward the wounded first, the one who'd taken a hit back at the ridge. His bandage was soaked. His hand trembled, but he was still upright. She slid under his arm, let him brace against her side. Behind them, the crew swept the flanks. No one talked, no one asked questions. They just moved. The Black Hawk landed like it had no time to spare, and it didn't. The gunner reached out. His fingers brushed the gloves still clipped to her belt. He didn't say anything, just fastened. One loop tighter, a gesture, nothing more. Lexa met his eyes. That was enough. They lifted fast. Jungle dropped beneath them. The canopy became a blur. She sat near the open door, her back straight, her eyes scanning every shadow. Below, the smoking dish shrank into clay. Then the second shape appeared, jagged and familiar. Her raptor, crushed. Into foliage, one wing buried, canopy torn open like a ribcage. She didn't look away. Not until it vanished into the mist. No one else looked down. Only Lexa. Who the hell is flying that Apache? It wasn't just confusion. It was panic, buried in the tone, smothered in the headset chatter, slipping through the cracks of enemy transmissions like smoke from a split shell casing. They'd set a perfect trap, ambush points on the ridge, hidden launchers, snipers stationed in elevation, timed decoys, and still the bird hadn't fallen worse. It laughed. Jordan didn't mean to, but something about the raw miscalculation of her enemies made her smirk. She wasn't invincible, not by any stretch, but they hadn't counted on what made her dangerous. It wasn't weapons or armor. It was the fact she'd stopped fearing death years ago. Now she just feared failure. Comms are lighting up, Keith said, scanning the signals on his display. 3 different fire teams repositioning. Air intercept confirmed. Could be Mi-35s or an armed drone. They're guessing you're solo now. Jordan kept her eyes forward, adjusting collective, tilting the Apache into a wide banking turn that hugged the canyon wall. The wind carried smoke and dust across the western slopes, and from a distance, the sky shimmered like oil in a pan. Let them. Yes, she said quietly. Her voice wasn't bravado, it was resolve, tired, even. She hadn't expected this today. It was supposed to be recon, low-altitude surveillance near the Afghan-Pakistan border, checking for heat signatures along an abandoned mule trail. No? Mention of organized militia. No signs of a cross-border cell. Certainly no intelligence about anti-aircraft traps, but they'd known. Not just that a bird was coming, but which bird? Keith narrowed his eyes. You think this was about you? Jordan didn't answer. She didn't have to, because deep inside, she already knew. This wasn't random. Someone had fed information to the wrong hands. Her tail number, her usual route, maybe even her voice signature. A leak, and she was the message. The Apache leveled again, its rotors thundering low over the rocks. Down below, scattered survivors from the ridgeline teams were trying to regroup, but they were disoriented. The plan had failed. Whatever momentum they thought they had, it was shattered now. But Jordan knew better. You don't win these fights by rattling cages. You win by finishing the sentence. She scanned left, eyes tracking the eastern flank of the canyon. A faint heat bloom appeared near the narrow inlet. A small, sleek signature climbing altitude. Drone, she murmured. Keith's head snapped toward the sensor panel, confirming. It's armed. Low payload, but rapid cycling. Which meant it was fast and stupid. A perfect counter to a distracted pilot. They're trying to split your focus, he said. Keep you looking up while they bait you down. Jordan nodded once. We won't give them that luxury. With a sudden jolt, she punched the Apache into a vertical climb. The engine howled. The canyon narrowed behind them, and the gunship's tail almost clipped a ledge as they cut altitude into a gut-turning corkscrew. The G's stacked in her chest. Keith grabbed the harness bar. Below them, the drone tried to pivot. It wasn't built for evasive combat. It needed distance, altitude, and clean targeting lanes. Jordan gave it none of those. She swung above it. Ben dropped, chain gun down, eyes locked. No radar, no computers, just instinct. 3 rounds. The drone buckled, spiraled, and disappeared behind the rocks in a blossom of smoke. Keith let out a breathless laugh. You've done this before, Jordan. Didn't respond, because in her head, a face was forming. Not Keith, not the drone, not even the soldiers below, but her, Captain Aaliyah Cross. 2 years ago, a woman with steady eyes and a surgeon's calm. They flew together in Syria, 2 Apaches weaving between buildings under blackout rules. On the last night of the Fallujah corridor operation, Jordan made a call, a risky maneuver to draw fire away from a crippled convoy. Cross had followed. Only 1 bird came back, and Jordan never forgave herself for that. So she flew low, took every risk herself, refused backup when she didn't need it. Because failure couldn't happen twice. Keith's voice crackled. Shadow 1, you've got a signal ping. 2 miles west, approaching vector. Jordan frowned. Friendly? He hesitated. Sort of. It's Raven Flight 2, Warthog variant. They were grounded 2 days ago. Might have taken off on your ping. Jordan's comms blinked green. Then a familiar voice. Gravelly, amused. You still hogging the sky, Shadow? She blinked. It was done, old, stubborn done. The A-10 pilot who once bet her a bottle of scotch she couldn't drift an Apache sideways through a canyon, and lost. Jordan exhaled softly. You picked a hell of a time to show, he laughed. Heard you were dancing with drones and ghosts. Figured you get bored if no one joined. A pause then. Need a wing? Jordan glanced at Keith, then at the canyon mouth where new hostiles were repositioning. No, she said. But you can cover the mouth. There was a click. Done. Keith shook his head. You're gonna clear the ridge alone? Jordan looked out again, not at the sky, but at the ground, the twisted launchers, the broken lines, and one small figure, the boy, being pulled to safety by a medic team from a nearby recon post that had picked up her emergency broadcast. She felt her heart slow. This was why she flew. Not for revenge, not even for redemption, but for clarity. Because flying meant choosing. Choosing when to show mercy, and when to remind them what fear felt like. Jordan shifted throttle, tilted nose down, One final sweep. The last 3 enemy fighters had found a cave opening on the far side. A last hideout. Maybe another launcher inside. Maybe not, but they'd see her coming. She hovered there. Exposed, quiet, steady. They moved. The first one raised a barrel. Jordan didn't. She just keyed comes and let her laugh echo across the canyon. How do you lead when no one said you should? How do you become the one they follow? Without rank, without question. The next morning, Lexa stood alone at the edge of the tarmac, visor down, arms folded across her chest as a fuel crew checked. The next Bird Systems, another Blackhawk, its paint dulled by salt wind, sat prepped for readiness drills. She'd signed up for it. Same crew, no command slot, no speech, just movement, because there was something deeper than orders. They had followed her because in the jungle, when the storm came, she had moved first. She didn't ask permission, didn't wait for confirmation. She acted. And now, the weight of that choice pressed differently. It wasn't glory. It was something. Quieter. Responsibility. Not because she wanted it, but because they gave it to her. Inside the crew quarters, the pilot was lacing boots. Her knuckles were scraped raw. No one had slept much. The sergeant leaned against the frame, chewing on a protein bar like it was a distraction. Did you know the timing would work? He asked finally, without looking at her. Lexa didn't answer right away. She took a breath, then said, "No." The sergeant nodded once. Still walked it. She nodded back. That was the whole exchange. Outside, the prep crew gave them the go. They moved like memory. Coordinated now. Each gesture tighter, more practiced. Like whatever had cracked open in the jungle hadn't just been Lexa's jet, but their assumptions. She wasn't the pilot anymore. She was something else. Something they didn't quite have words for, but trusted anyway. As the rotor spun up, one of the younger crewmen jogged to Lexa's side, half out of breath. Command asked if we want a comms brief on satellite patterning. He said. Lexa didn't look at him. Already mapped it. He paused. Right. I'll tell them we're good. She watched him turn back. Shoulders a little straighter. They lifted off together. This wasn't a mission. Not officially, just a drill. Just practice. But drills were where truce got built. The jungle was smaller this time. Or maybe they were bigger. The canopy blurred beneath them. Lexa sat near the open side panel, one hand on the rail, her gaze calm, still scanning. Still reading, but not for enemies, for moments, shifts in wind, variations in cover. The way a tree curved that told you where heat pooled and where shadows stretched longest. She couldn't explain how she saw those things. She just did, and they knew it now. At the edge of the ridge, they touched down. The same zone as before. This time, it was clean. No dish, no trap. Just sun filtering through mist. They moved into the foliage, each step echoing the last mission. But lighter, a different. Wait now, not survival. Just readiness. Just proof that what happened wasn't luck. Lexa watched them move, no wasted motion. The wounded crewman from before was back, arms still stiff, but he kept pace. At the rear, the pilot walked with more weight in her step. Not fatigue. Focus. They swept the ridgeline, rechecked concealment paths. At one point, the sergeant called over his shoulder. You seeing this too? Lexa stepped beside him. A patch of moss disturbed. Shallow heel print barely visible in the earth. Old, she said. 4 days. Heel heavy. No spread. The sergeant raised an eyebrow. You get that from one print? Lexa just nodded. He didn't question it. Didn't need to. They kept moving. At the next break in the ridge, Lexa crouched low and motioned for pause. They formed up naturally. No call-outs, no over-explaining. She ran a short-range scan with a new device, issued. Just that morning. It crackled once, bounced back nothing. Still, her eyes lingered. The crew waited. After 10 seconds, she gave the go-ahead. No hesitation, just trust as they crossed the path that once held the jammer. No one said a word, but everyone felt it. That space had meant something. Lexa looked down once. Ash still marked the soil. The dish's remains had been cleared, but the ground still remembered. And so did they. At the extraction point, the same clearing flared open, bird inbound, hover mode. This time, it came without fear. The gunner waved. Familiar now. The lift was smooth. Lexa boarded last, just like before, but this time, no one adjusted. Her gloves, because nothing needed adjusting. What she was now, it fit. How do you go back to normal when survival rewired what normal means? The hangar lights flickered once as Lexa stepped through the side entrance. The familiar scent of burnt grease and jet fuel rising in waves on the workbench. Someone had left a half-assembled comms unit open, wires exposed, circuitry naked to the room's static. She paused for a second, fingers brushing the edge of the panel. It looked like her, held together, but not really, just functional. She left it untouched. Down the corridor, a junior tech nodded to her. Not a salute, just a nod. The kind people give when they don't have the right words, but still want you to know. They saw. Lexa kept walking. She didn't want words, didn't want recognition. She wanted readiness. At 0530, the team ran a silent walkthrough. Same terrain, same movement arcs, same extraction window, drill, practice. But every motion held memory. That tripwire, that sound in the trees, that one moment where a single step too soon would have ended everything. Lexa found herself replaying the angle. Could she still do it? Would she still choose to? No one asked. They just moved with her, flanking tighter, breathing in sync, moving like a single frame of film. After the sweep, they circled near the simulation LZ. The pilot crouched, tracing her boot in the dirt absently. Lexa stood a few steps away, watching the tree line. The wind shifted. Someone behind her coughed. Then came the voice. You ever think about what would have happened if you didn't move? It was the young one, the crewman who'd relayed Command's question that morning. Still green, still sharp. Lexa didn't turn. She just stared into the trees. Yeah, she said. Silence. Then he said, quieter. So why did you? A beat. Past two. Lex's voice was calm when it came, because I knew the way in. That was all. He didn't ask more, and she didn't offer more. Later that day, back at base, a liaison from command arrived, all stiff collar and plastic smile. He asked for Lex's report, formal this time. She handed him the brief. 12 pages. Handwritten, no filler, just facts, just angles, just the markers she had memorized in silence. He skimmed it, cleared his throat. We're forwarding this to Intel review, he said, and your future assignments are under consideration. Lexa just stared. Assignments? She didn't need a desk. She needed terrain, later. She stood on the edge of the platform where her Raptor had once been housed. The bay was empty now, cleaned out, ready for the next name, the next pilot. Her shadow stretched across the floor. Distorted by overhead light, she remembered the first time she'd climbed into that aircraft. No fear, just control. The sky had been hers. But now she knew something more dangerous. Control wasn't flying at 50,000 feet. Control was crawling through jungle mud with nothing but instinct and a sight-on, and still pulling a team out alive. That wasn't altitude. That was gravity. The weight of every footstep, every call, every silence. She reached into her pouch and pulled out a single shard of canopy glass, scavenged from the wreck before evac. She turned it over once in her palm. It caught the light, flickered slightly, then dimmed. That, too, was enough in the mess hall. That evening, the crew sat in quiet clusters. The young one was sketching something in a notebook. The sergeant leaned back, arms crossed, watching the door. The pilot sat near the edge, one hand wrapped around a mug that had long gone cold. When Lexa walked in, No one rose, but space opened in the circle, unspoken, expected. She sat down. The sergeant didn't look at her when he said it. "You ever gonna take command?" Lexa didn't blink. "No." The pilot smirked faintly. "Why not?" Lexa's answer came without pause, because then you'd stop thinking. That made them laugh. Not loud, just enough, like pressure easing. The mug was passed around. Conversation drifted back to what it always did. Nothing and everything. And, for the first time, Lexa felt something settle. She didn't need stripes to lead. She didn't need wings to be airborne. What she'd carried out of that jungle wasn't just herself. It was them. It was all of them, alive and still watching the tree line. What do you do when the quiet no longer feels like peace, but like waiting for the next silence to break? Lexa stood on the roof of the forward outpost, one hand resting lightly on the rusted edge of a satellite dish no longer in use below her. The jungle rolled into fog, layered in green, still, almost beautiful. But she didn't trust it. Not anymore. The island hadn't stopped watching. And the silence never meant safe. It only meant not yet behind her. The crew had rotated into 2-day standby. No immediate drills, no active missions, just rest. But none of them were resting. The sergeant spent mornings reworking gear loadouts. No one asked him to update. The pilot rewrote extraction math by hand over and over, checking for a pattern no software could find. Lexa walked the perimeter, alone, each night. At 03:00, she'd rise, put on her boots, and walk the gravel between the hangars, not out of insomnia, not guilt, out of readiness. Something didn't feel finished, and her body knew it, even if command didn't. On the third night, the comms tech flagged her down. "Lieutenant," he said, then paused. "Sorry, Lexa." She tilted her head. He looked nervous. "You should see something." In the darkened ops room, the only glow came from a bank of low-spectrum displays. Satellite tracking, signal drift, overlays, flight paths. The tech pointed to a blinking icon just off the northwest arc of the island. Shallow water, remote, no scheduled overflights, no listed recon, but the pulse was familiar. Lexa leaned closer. It wasn't a signal exactly. It was a repeat, a mimicked pattern. 5 seconds on, 2 off, then again. Her stomach tightened. The dish was gone, but the architecture wasn't. She tapped the console once. "Can you isolate the wave?" The tech nodded. "Already tried. It's not radar, not thermal. It's just pressure." Lexa turned away from the screen, already mentally mapping that side of the island. Too shallow for a stealth drop. Too far for local villages, and yet, "I want a drone over it," she said. The tech hesitated. "I can try, but not from base." From the last ridge fallback, low altitude, no signature, just eyes. She didn't raise her voice, but the tech obeyed. An hour later, the drone feed buzzed live. Nothing, just ocean rippling into coral shelf until a shadow moved. Not a boat, not a bird, a figure, standing knee-deep in surf. Lexa stepped forward, eyes narrowing. Infrared picked up no heat signature, no ID, no patch. But the stance, still, watching. The figure didn't move for 21 minutes, then turned and walked back into the trees. The feed cut, not jammed, just ended. Lexa stared at the blank screen. Then, left. She didn't report it, didn't log it. She packed instead by morning. The crew knew without being told. The pilot was already at the bird, no question asked. The sergeant handed her a sidearm. "Same frequency as last time," he muttered. Lexa nodded. "Fallback?" the young crewman asked, tightening his harness. Lexa paused. "Negative. No fallback, just forward." They launched before midday. Not sanctioned, not flagged, but no one stopped them. The skies were clear this time. No ghosts on radar, no last minute drops, just a familiar quiet. And yet Lexa watched the ocean beneath them like it might open its mouth. When they reached the northwest ridge, the Black Hawk held hover while Lexa rappelled down first. Boots hit soft earth, the air smelled. Different, cleaner, but not safe. She waved the team forward. They moved without a sound, through palm and undergrowth, along cliffs and roots slicked by sea air. Then she saw it. Where the figure had stood, nothing remained. But the sand was marked, not footsteps, symbols, drawn with something blunt, clean, precise. She crouched, tracing one with her gloved finger, a pattern, repeating, not language, targeting. The sergeant crouched beside her. What's it mean? Lexa didn't answer, because she was already looking up at the tree line. Something shimmered there. Just for a moment, light bending wrong, movement without shape. She rose slowly, reached for the beacon clipped at her hip, not to signal rescue, to mark a position, her own. Whatever this was, it wasn't random, and it hadn't ended. She turned to the crew. 2 options. We backtrack and lose the trail. Or, the pilot asked, Lexa's eyes narrowed. Or we follow it and end it. No. One asked what it was, because by now, they all felt it too. If she disappeared right now, would they know she wasn't running, but leading where no map dared mark? Lexa stared into the trees. The shimmer was gone, but its echo remained, not in sound, but in stillness, a kind of silence that pressed. And from all directions, too heavy, too clean. The jungle here didn't breathe like normal jungle. It watched, it waited, behind her. The crew formed up without orders. They didn't ask what she saw. They trusted what she felt. She pointed forward. 2 fingers. Low and direct, the trail curved inward, away from the shore, where roots swallowed stone and light broke in fractured angles through dense canopy. As they moved, the symbols in the sand faded behind them, a warning they hadn't asked for. A message meant for someone else, but she had read it, and now they were answering it. 50 meters in, they found the first sign. Not footprints, not blood, a piece of gear, half buried, a headset, military issue. Coated in moss, still warm. The young one picked it up, eyes wide. It's still running. Lexa didn't take it from him. She just nodded, confirmed. It wasn't a memory, it was a presence. This area had been occupied, still was. The sergeant dropped to one knee and scanned the ground with his monocular. Thermal's thin, he muttered. But there's a cone, 30 degrees off that ridge. Lexa adjusted her optic, counted the drop in pressure, checked the wind. There's a hide, she said softly. One shooter, could be recon. Could be a decoy, the pilot added. Lexa nodded again. That's fine. Then we treat it like bait. Same approach as the jammer. She didn't have to say more. They broke into formation, quiet steps, hands steady. At the top of the slope, they found it, a blind carved into the cliffside, just deep enough to house a kneeling position and a scoped weapon mount. Now empty, the ground was still warm, but the shooter was gone. Lexa crouched, scanned the horizon, not for movement, but for intent. She could feel it again, not an ambush. Not panic, a pattern, a signal. This is a relay, she whispered. We're not the target. We're the message. The crew exchanged looks. The sergeant leaned in. You think they're testing response time? Lexa stared into the valley below. No, they're testing us. She stepped away from the blind, at the far edge of the ridge. Where a drop-off met tangled roots, she paused, then knelt. There, etched into stone, nearly invisible from above, was a second set of marks, smaller, cleaner, too precise to be weathered, and arranged in a triangle. One line flared longer than the others. A vector, a direction. She traced it with her finger. The rock was cold, not natural. This wasn't someone's campsite. It was a signature. The pilot crouched beside her. Is this what hit you in the sky? Lexa's mouth tightened. Not the weapon, she said. The hand behind it, it wasn't a strike team. It wasn't Mercs. It was something else. A test. She stood slowly. This trail wasn't meant to be followed. It was meant to be found and left unanswered. But Lexa didn't believe in silence. Not anymore. They marked the location and left. By the time the bird lifted them out, the jungle had already started to reclaim the marks. Leaves drifted down like slow ashes. The sight faded. Not because it was hidden, but because it never wanted to be remembered. But Lexa remembered it back at the base. No one asked where they'd been, because their boots told the story. Mud, cuts, tension, and silence that spoke like thunder. Lexa didn't go to the debrief room, didn't log a report. Instead, she returned to the operations feed. The satellite screen still showed the island, layered in soft green and black. Pulse lines steady now. Clean. Too clean. She zoomed in on the northwest shelf. No figures, no movement. But she knew what wasn't showing. Some shadows don't register. On radar, some signals exist only once you walk far enough without looking back. She didn't speak, just adjusted the angle, marked it on her own, then walked out, outside. Dusk curled in over the hangar roofs. Lights blinked on, slow and amber. The wind carried the distant hum of something coming. Not a mission, not a war. Just the next moment where someone would freeze at a screen and whisper, "We lost her." But Lexa wouldn't be lost. She would be exactly where she chose to be, walking toward the thing that moved first, that dared her to come find it. She didn't wear medals, didn't need speeches, didn't need permission to step forward. Because sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts.